The smell of fried onions and grilled meat filled the crowded roadside restaurant, but nobody paid much attention to anything except the group of bikers whose loud laughter echoed above the clattering plates. They were the kind who never blended into the background: leather jackets, heavy boots, tattoos crawling over their arms, and voices roughened from years of riding through storms. But the noise shifted the moment the restaurant door creaked open. A teenage girl stepped inside, her face pale with hesitation, her jacket too big for her thin frame, its torn sleeves fluttering as she walked. The bikers spotted her instantly and their laughter grew even louder. They weren't laughing at her shy walk or her quiet eyes. They were laughing at her jacket, old, faded, stitched in several places, yet boldly carrying patches that seemed too heavy for someone so fragile. The sound of their mockery rolled through the restaurant like thunder, but everything changed when they noticed one particular patch, the one placed right over her heart. The moment their eyes landed on it, the place transformed into silence, as if someone had turned off the world for a second. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and stories that restore faith in humanity, take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to our channel, Ripple of Kindness. Your support helps more people find these stories. The girl's name was Aira, and at 16, life had already pushed her into corners most adults were afraid to imagine. She didn't walk into the restaurant because she wanted food. She walked in because it was the only place open on a cold evening, and she didn't know where else to go while waiting for the long route bus that came only twice a day. Her jacket was her only shield from the world, both literally and emotionally. It belonged to her father, the man she hadn't seen in 2 years. Before he left, before life changed, before the silence between them grew too wide to reach across, he had handed her the jacket with a tired smile and told her it was a reminder that strength wasn't always loud, sometimes it was stitched quietly into you. The jacket still carried his scent in the lining, but it also carried something else, pieces of her memory sewn into patches that only she understood. One patch was a small mountain, representing the trip he had promised her but never fulfilled. Another was a wolf, signifying the bedtime stories he used to tell her. Most people ignored them. Some laughed. Some asked questions. But Aira always kept the final patch hidden under her scarf, the patch that was now visible because she was shivering and had pulled the scarf down. It was simple, a bright red emblem with golden wings wrapped around 2 letters, FM underneath it, stitched with uneven teenage hands, were the words, "Fallen Members." In memory of Captain Michael Kahn. Her father. To the bikers in that restaurant, this wasn't just a patch. It was a name they knew, a man they respected, a rider whose compassion had saved more than one life on the road. They knew the stories of how he would stop for stranded travelers in the rain, how he once carried an injured stranger 8 miles on foot, how he never refused food to anyone in need. To these men, Michael Kahn wasn't a myth. He was a legend, a part of the biker brotherhood whose absence still echoed like an unfinished journey. And his daughter was standing right in front of them. Aira didn't realize the shift around her. She was used to being invisible, used to being misunderstood. She kept her gaze on the ground, trying to quietly take a seat near the corner. She hadn't eaten a real meal in 2 days, she didn't have money for one now either. She only hoped no one asked her to leave as she waited for a bus that seemed to be running later than usual. Her mother worked double shifts in another city, and Aira had been traveling alone for school-related paperwork. Nothing had gone right that day, she'd missed the early bus, lost her lunch money, and got caught in the rain. The jacket felt heavier than ever, and she felt smaller than she had in a long time. Across the room, the bikers exchanged glances. These were rough men, shaped by hard lives, not the type anyone expected to show softness. Yet something in the sight of this fragile girl wearing their fallen brother's patch pierced right through their hardened surfaces. In an unspoken agreement, they all rose from their seats and approached her table, their heavy boots making slow, deliberate thuds. Everyone in the restaurant watched, expecting a scene. Even Aira's shoulders tensed. But instead of teasing her, one of the bikers quietly placed a steaming plate of food on her table. Another slid a cup of hot tea next to it. A third pulled out a chair and sat across from her, his expression softening in a way that surprised everyone. The room had fallen into a respectful hush as they formed a protective circle, not to intimidate her, but to shield her. Aira couldn't understand what was happening. She whispered a small thank you, her voice trembling. Her hands shook as she picked up the spoon, and when she took the first bite of warm food, her eyes burned with tears she had been holding back all day. Something about the bikers' gentle presence, their strange familiarity, made her feel a warmth she had missed for so long. One of the bikers told her, in a calm, steady tone, that her father had once saved his life. Another said Michael had fixed his bike for free when he was stranded in the middle of nowhere. Another added that Michael never rode away from someone who needed help. Aira's heart clenched as she listened. She had spent the last 2 years thinking her father had abandoned her, that he had chosen the road over his own family. Nobody had told her that he had passed away saving someone else, a truth her mother had kept hidden while trying to protect her from grief. But these men, these strangers, they gave her the missing pieces of a story she was never told. Each word they shared felt like stitching her heart back together. The room around her became blurry, her breath caught in her chest, and tears slipped silently down her cheeks as she realized her father hadn't left her. He had been taken, and he had died exactly the way he had lived, helping someone. The bikers recognized the pain in her eyes, and in their own hidden ways, they felt it too. They had lost a brother, and now they were looking at the piece of him he had left behind. As the evening darkened and raindrops tapped against the restaurant windows, the bikers stayed with her. Not out of pity, but out of respect. They asked nothing in return. They only made sure she ate, warmed up, and felt safe. When the delayed bus finally arrived, they walked with her to the door like silent guardians, their massive figures shielding her from the cold wind. The restaurant staff watched the whole scene with softened hearts, touched by the unexpected tenderness in what had started as mockery and noise. Aira stepped toward the bus, but before boarding, she turned back one last time. The bikers stood together in a line, heads slightly bowed, hands over their hearts, honoring her father through her. In that moment, she understood something she had never known she needed. Her father might be gone, but his kindness lived on in people he had helped, in lives he had changed, and now, in the way they were looking after her. She wasn't alone after all. She was part of something bigger, a legacy of compassion that didn't end with death. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Ripple of Kindness. Your support helps keep these true-to-life stories alive. Special request: before the story ends, comment below and tell us what part of Aira's journey moved you the most. As the bus pulled away, Aira pressed her palm gently over her father's patch. For the first time in years, she didn't feel the weight of abandonment. She felt strength, warmth, and an invisible hand guiding her forward. The bikers remained in the distance, watching until the bus disappeared, their hearts quietly echoing the same message her father had once told them all, that kindness, no matter how small, always finds its way back home. And that night, Aira found her way back too, back to hope, back to truth, and back to the legacy of a man whose kindness had changed more lives than she ever knew. Aira stared out the bus window as the lights of the restaurant faded into the night, but the image of those bikers standing in a silent line stayed imprinted in her mind like a photograph she would never forget. The hum of the engine, the murmur of passengers, and the gentle rocking of the bus did little to calm the storm inside her. She pressed her fingers against the patch on her father's jacket, and for the first time, it didn't feel like a weight. It felt like a heartbeat. It felt like someone was telling her that the story she had been living wasn't the full truth, that there was more, hidden beneath years of silence and pain. The bus moved through the dark highway, slicing through fog and long shadows, but everything around her felt strangely brighter. She had stepped into that restaurant as a lost girl, but she was leaving it with a piece of her father she thought she had been denied forever. Yet even as her heart softened, a sharp ache slowly formed behind her ribs. If the bikers knew so much about her father, why didn't she? What else had been kept from her? The thought made her chest tighten. She closed her eyes and leaned against the cold window, letting the vibration of the bus lull her into the edges of sleep. But it wasn't rest she found. It was memory. She saw flashes of her father lifting her onto his shoulders, laughing as she pretended to steer his old bike. She saw his hands, grease-stained, calloused, strong, fixing her broken toys the same way he fixed broken engines. She heard the faint echo of his voice, warm and steady, telling her that the bravest people were not the loudest but the ones who stood up again after falling. And then, as all memories do when they collide with pain, everything blurred into darkness. When the bus reached her town, dawn was just beginning to spread across the sky. The streets were empty, washed in pale orange light. Aira stepped off the bus quietly, her backpack digging into her shoulder. She wasn't ready to face home yet, not with the weight of everything she had learned sitting heavily on her chest. Instead, she walked slowly toward the riverbank, where she used to go whenever she needed to breathe. The river was calm that morning, its gentle current moving like a whisper across the stones. Aira sat on a large rock and pulled her knees close, staring at the ripples moving outward. The world felt different now. Not safer, not simpler, just heavier with truth. Her mother arrived an hour later, breathless, worried, tears threatening her eyes. She must have received word from someone that Aira had arrived early, or maybe a mother's heart simply knew when her child was hurting. Aira didn't speak at first. She only watched her mother sit beside her, hands trembling slightly. And in that fragile silence, Aira realized something: the grief she carried wasn't hers alone. Her mother had carried her own storms, her own wounds, her own fears. She had kept the truth from Aira not to hurt her, but to protect her from breaking. But lies, even protective ones, leave scars. And Aira had been living with those scars without ever knowing their cause. As the sun climbed, her mother finally revealed the truth, that Michael hadn't abandoned them. He had gone out on a rescue call for a stranded rider during a storm, and the accident that took his life was something she could barely talk about without her voice cracking. She explained how she had tried to shield Aira from the pain, hoping she would heal without knowing the full story. But in doing so, she had unintentionally made Aira feel abandoned. When she finished, Aira felt tears spill silently down her face. The truth hurt, but it also freed her. It filled the empty spaces inside her with clarity, painful clarity, but clarity nonetheless. Over the next week, something shifted in Aira. She began wearing her father's jacket not as a reminder of loss, but as a badge of strength. She visited the old garage where her father used to work, running her fingers along the dusty tools and rusty chains, imagining the stories the walls could tell if they could speak. She spent her afternoons at the riverbank, sketching patches she wanted to sew onto the jacket, little pieces of memories she was reclaiming. And then came the day that changed everything once again. A loud rumble echoed through the narrow streets of her neighborhood. Aira looked up from her notebook and saw the same group of bikers approaching, their engines humming in a united rhythm. People stopped to stare as they rode up to the riverbank and formed a semicircle around her. She stood frozen, unsure why they were there, until the leader stepped forward and extended a small, worn-out box. Inside it lay a patch unlike any she had seen. It was black with silver stitching, shaped like a shield, with wings spreading across it. At the center was her father's name, written in bold, respectful letters: Captain Michael Kahn, Guardian of the Road. Forever riding. Aira's breath caught in her throat. The bikers told her that this was the highest honor their brotherhood gave, a tribute reserved for someone who had lived with exceptional courage and kindness. They had been waiting years to give it to someone who carried his blood, his legacy, his heart. As she took the patch in trembling hands, something inside her settled. It was as if the missing piece of her story had come home. The bikers didn't leave after that. They stayed for hours, sharing stories about Michael, stories Aira had never heard, stories her heart desperately needed. She learned how her father once rode through a snowstorm to save a lost traveler, how he fixed broken bikes without charging a penny, how he carried food for needy families on the outskirts of town. Every word felt like a gift, adding color to memories that had faded with time. When the sun dipped behind the trees, the bikers made her an offer, one that startled her, then warmed her, then healed her. They told her she was now part of their family. That if she ever needed help, protection, or a place to belong, they would be there. She didn't have to ride a bike or know their world. She only had to know that she wasn't alone. Loneliness ended that day. Months passed, and Aira changed in ways she hadn't expected. She became stronger, more confident, more willing to reach out. She started volunteering at shelters, fixing small things for people like her father once did. The bikers visited often, watching proudly as she grew into someone who carried Michael's legacy not just in her jacket but in her actions. And slowly, the jacket stopped being a symbol of loss. It became a symbol of purpose. But the moment that truly transformed her came 6 months later when she finally felt ready to visit her father's grave. She went with the bikers, her mother, and the jacket patched with a lifetime of memories. As she knelt before the tombstone, she gently pressed the silver shield patch onto the jacket, the final piece of a story that had taken her too long to understand. A soft breeze brushed her cheek, and for the first time, she didn't cry from heartbreak. She cried from healing. From love. From peace. She whispered a silent promise to her father, that she would live with kindness, courage, and compassion, just like he had. That his patch would continue to inspire not just her, but everyone who crossed her path. And as she stood, surrounded by the bikers who had once laughed at her jacket but now stood as her protectors, she realized something profound. Sometimes, family isn't just who you're born to. Sometimes, it's who steps forward when the world steps back. Aira walked away from the grave that day not as a girl broken by the past, but as a young woman ready to build her future, with strength stitched into every thread of her jacket, and love carried in every beat of her heart.